आगे that is the glossopharyngeal, and behind the vagus there is origin of 11th cranial nerve. तो उनके बीच में जो होती है that is the vagus nerve. ये सारे जो होते हैं from the medulloblancata, lateral aspect of the medulloblancata से arise होती है. So glossopharyngeal in front of this vagus and behind is the spinal accessory. So this vagus nerve arises from the medulloblancata, and again it leaves through the foramen lacerum, and after leaving the foramen lacerum it forms ganglion, जिसको हम बोलते हैं jugular ganglion. That is the jugular ganglion. Then this nerve, after leaving this the cranium through foramen lacerum and formation, and there is formation of jugular ganglion. तो उसके बाद क्या होता है, then the nerve it runs or it descends along the neck of the animal. जो neck of the animal है वहां से होके नीचे जाती है, descends along the neck of the animal through a groove जिसको हम बोलते हैं that is known as jugular furrow, जिसमें ये jugular veins जहां से रन करते हैं, that is a depression that is known as jugular furrow हम उसको बोलते हैं. So it descends along this furrow, that is the jugular furrow. So when it runs through this jugular furrow, this nerve it gets accompanied by the sympathetic trunk and the carotid artery. So this vagus nerve along with the sympathetic trunk and the carotid artery, then it gets enclosed by a fibrous connective tissue sheath that is known as carotid sheath. So when it descends along the jugular, along the side of the neck through the jugular furrow, तो उसके साथ क्या accompany करता है, there are other structures that is a sympathetic trunk and carotid artery. तो ये सारे मिलके they will pass through a connective tissue sheath होता है, एक टनल होती है, तो ये सारे उसी में से पास होके जाते हैं, that is known as carotid. इसको हम बोलते हैं that is known as carotid sheath. ठीक है. So वहां से होके through along the neck region, then it will enters into the thorax. तो वहां से neck region से इसको जाना कहाँ है, into the thoracic cavity. Thoracic cavity से होके फिर ये जाएगी abdominal cavity में. ठीक है. So this was about the vagus. So it is origin, it is from the medulloblancata. In front of the vagus कौन सी nerve होती है, that is the 9th glossopharyngeal. उसके पीछे there is origin of the spinal accessory, and so when it arises from this medulloblancata it leaves the cranium through foramen lacerum. तो फिर after leaving the foramen lacerum एक ganglion that is known as jugular ganglion, and then it runs along the jugular furrow. Here it gets accompanied by the sympathetic trunk and carotid artery, and these are structures they will pass through a tunnel or a fibrous connective tissue sheath that is known as carotid sheath. Protective covering होती है ये. So from here, when it runs through the carotid sheath, finally this vagus nerve it enters into the thorax. Thorax से through the diaphragm it goes into the abdominal cavity. So now coming here to the distribution. So when it entered into the thorax, here we have the right vagus, we have the left vagus. Right vagus is there, left because दो होती है, one right side से, another comes from the left side. So right vagus is there and we have the left vagus. The right vagus and the left vagus, their chorus or their distribution, it is different. So the right vagus and the left vagus, they vary in their distribution. So first जो right vagus होती है वो क्या करेगी, that runs under the right axillary artery. So axillary artery, it is the artery which supplies to the जो forelimb को, that means the right forelimb is supplied by the right axillary artery. जो left axillary artery वो left forelimb को supply करती है. So this right vagus it runs under the right axillary artery. Then it reaches to the trachea. On the right side of the trachea it runs, and here it divides into two branches. एक हो गया dorsal branch, एक हो गया आपका ventral branch. ठीक है. So ये हो गया आपका right vagus. So thorax में दोनों जाएंगी. राइट साइड से जो right vagus आएगा, then we have left vagus, but here there does distribution, here it varies. Right vagus, it runs under the right axillary artery and then along the right side of the trachea. Then right side of the trachea. Then this vagus nerve then divides into dorsal and the ventral branches. Now coming to the left vagus. जो left vagus होती है, left vagus nerve, it runs under the left axillary artery. And so first, जैसे right vagus under the right axillary artery run करता है, वैसे ही left vagus left axillary artery के नीचे से run करता है. Then it crosses the aorta. That means the aorta. ठीक है, the base of the aorta, that means it, and the aorta arises from the heart, so ये इसको भी cross करता है. Here it crosses the base or root of the aorta and finally it reaches to the left lung. ठीक है, so left lung के पहुंचते ही then it goes crosses to the surface of the esophagus. So left vagus left axillary artery से होके जाएगी, then it crosses the aorta, aorta से होके left lung तक जाएगी, left lung से फिर it reaches to the esophagus. So जब esophagus तक here it will divide into dorsal and ventral branch. जैसे right vagus यहाँ पे dorsal और ventral branch बनाती थी, वैसे ही left vagus here it will divides into a dorsal and the ventral branch. फिर होता क्या है, then so after the bifurcation of the right and the left vagus into dorsal and ventral branches, so ye dorsal plus the dorsal branch of the right vagus plus the dorsal branch of the left vagus, they unite, plus their ventral branches, they also unite, and they will form a dorsal and the ventral esophagus, या dorsal trunk and ventral trunk बनाते हैं. डॉर्सल एंड वेंट्रल ट्रंक बनाते हैं दोनों मिलके. ठीक है, दोनों मिल जाते हैं, दे फॉर्म डॉर्सल एंड वेंट्रल, दैट इज ईसोफेजियल कंटिन्यूएशन ऑफ वैगस जिसको हम बोलते हैं. जस्ट सिंपली दे यूनाइट एंड दे फॉर्म डॉर्सल एंड वेंट्रल ट्रंक. दिस dorsal and ventral continuation of the vagus, esophageal continuation of the vagus, ये दोनों nerves ये क्या करेंगे, they pass through the diaphragm. ठीक है, they pass through this diaphragm and they enter into the abdominal cavity. So along the neck region they enter into the thoracic cavity. From thoracic cavity here they form dorsal and ventral esophageal continuations of the vagi. Then these enters through the diaphragm through along with the esophagus, जो hiatus esophageal है, along through this opening they enter into the abdominal cavity. ठीक है, so during this whole course, that means along the from the neck into the thorax, then into the abdominal cavity, the vagus nerve it gives different collateral branches. ठीक है, so the branches, so there are the three courses. One is the cervical, then we have the cervical, then we have thoracic, then we have the abdominal course, because ये तीनों जगहों को जाती है, तीनों, that is why it is most widely distributed. So now coming to the branches, जो cervical course होता है उसमें कौन कौन सी collateral branches देता है. So during the cervical course, the nerve that arises first, that is the auricular nerve. This auricular nerve it arises directly from the jugular. From the name indicate, that means it supplies to the external ear. Then we have pharyngeal and esophageal branches. This pharyngeal branch it supplies to the pharynx, and esophageal it supplies to the esophagus. Okay, second, then we mucous membrane of the larynx and a muscle, single muscle, that is known as cricothyroid muscle of the larynx. So ये mucous larynx को supply करते हैं, plus mucous membrane of larynx plus a muscle that is known as cricothyroid muscle. Only one muscle, that is cricothyroid. जो remaining muscles of the larynx they are supplied by other nerve. Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So these are the branches of the vagus nerve during the cervical course. So when it runs along the neck region, that means through through a sheath, that is carotid sheath. तो वहां से जब होके आता है तो auricular nerve that supplies to the external ear. Then we have pharyngeal and esophageal branches, which are supplied to the pharynx and esophagus, and anterior laryngeal nerve that supplies to the larynx plus cricothyroid muscle. Now coming to the thoracic chorus. So within the thoracic cavity, the vagus nerve, it gives cardiac branches that supplies to the heart. It gives the pulmonary branches that supplies to the lungs, and very important nerve, that is posterior laryngeal nerve, or most commonly it's called a recurrent laryngeal nerve. Okay? Anterior laryngeal nerve, that was the branch which arises from the vagus, that was in the cervical chorus, but here it is the posterior. ठीक है, ये एंटीरियर लैरेंजियल नर्व है, यहाँ पे आ गया इन द थोरेसिक कोर्स में, दैट मीन इन द थोरेसिक कैविटी वी हैव this posterior laryngeal nerve or recurrent laryngeal nerve. So here is a variation. That means the right recurrent laryngeal nerve and the left recurrent laryngeal nerve. Okay? So right wali, that will arise from the right vagus, and the left, that will arise from the left vagus. But their origin, that varies. So right one, it arises from the vagus earlier, while as the left one, it arises at the later stage. So now coming to the first, that is the right laryngeal. That is the right recurrent laryngeal nerve. So right recurrent laryngeal nerve, it arises from the vagus at the level of the first rib. So when it arises from the vagus, just at the level of the first rib, it gives branches to the trachea, that means tracheal branches and esophageal branches, and then it again leaves the thoracic cavity, then ascends along the neck region through the same carotid sheath. ठीक है, वो पहले उसमें क्या था, sympathetic trunk था उसमें, then we have this vagus nerve, and then we have the carotid artery. So ये सारे, this recurrent laryngeal nerve, that is the right one, it also accompanies this structure. So here it will ascend through the same carotid sheath, and then it reaches to the larynx and supplies to the muscles of the larynx, except the cricothyroid muscle, which is supplied by the anterior laryngeal nerve. So यहाँ पे क्या होगा, जो right one होती है, ये vagus nerve से, that means the right vagus, it arises from the right vagus, but just at the level of first rib. Then, so when it arises from the vagus nerve, it gives branches to trachea and esophagus, then it ascends along the neck region, it leaves the thorax, then passes through the carotid sheath, and then finally reaches to the larynx and supplies to the muscles of the larynx. So ये हो गया आपका right recurrent laryngeal nerve. Now we have the left one, that is the left recurrent laryngeal nerve. So left recurrent laryngeal nerve कहाँ से? That means from the left vagus से arise होगी. But here it arises just at the level of the base of the heart. So that means first, so right one, that arises earlier, whereas the left one, it arises at the later stage at the level of the base of the heart. वो first rib पे arise होती है, it arises at the base of the heart. यहाँ पे क्या scene चलता है? So when it arises from the vagus nerve just at the level of the base of the heart, तो यहाँ पे भी same है, it gives branches to trachea and esophagus, then again it leaves the thorax जैसे उसने किया था, then यहाँ पे, but here is a difference. So when this leaves the thorax, here it does not pass through the carotid sheath. So it ascends through the neck region, but on the left side. So on the left side, we have the esophagus. So esophagus will separate this left recurrent laryngeal nerve from the carotid sheath. So this left one, it does not pass through the carotid sheath. So because of the esophagus that separates it. So जब वहां से ascent through the neck region, through the jugular furrow, so this finally reaches to the target, that is the larynx. So जाना इनको दोनों को larynx के पास. वो carotid sheath से होके जाती है, ये carotid sheath से बाहर जाती है, because बीच में esophagus आता है इसमें. So then supplies to the muscles of the larynx, जैसे right recurrent laryngeal nerve supply करती. So this was a difference in the course of the right and the left recurrent laryngeal nerves. So they both arises in the इसमें thoracic course of the vagus. Now we have the third, when it enters the esophageal continuations of the vagi, that is the dorsal trunk and the ventral trunk. So वो दोनों क्या, through the diaphragm they enter into the abdomen. So here we start is the abdominal course. So dorsal trunk क्या करता है, ये क्या करेगा, it gives branches जो supply करेगी, that supplies to the omesum and abomesum, plus it again gives branches that supply to the spleen और rumen को जाएंगी, plus it also gives branches to the small intestine, large intestine, and it also gives branches to the kidney. तो almost हर एक organ को ये branches supply करता है. Then we have the ventral trunk, that means the ventral esophageal continuation. So वो क्या करेगा, that gives branches to the reticulum and abomesum. तो यहाँ पे reticulum तो था नहीं कहीं पे, so इस reticulum को, that is supplied by the ventral trunk of this vagus, and this is also plus the abomesum. Very important branch here, it is the pyloric branch. So the pyloric branch, it supplies to the pyloric part of the abomesum. So plus it also gives branch to the duodenum and liver. So this was all about the origin plus the distribution and the course of the vagus. So which from the medulla oblongata say through the cranium, through which foramen, then it forms a ganglion, then it leaves along the carotid sheath, फिर thoracic cavity से abdominal cavity में, और बीच में जितने भी branch आती है, we have all discussed here. Now we have this the 11th cranial nerve, that is the spinal. This is the 11th cranial nerve, that is the spinal accessory. It is motor nerve. Again, here there are two roots. Spinal accessory, it has got two roots. One is the medullary root, another is the spinal root. Medullary root, here it arises from the lateral, just behind the vagus. जहाँ पे vagus थी उसके पीछे जो root होता है, medullary root of the spinal accessory, that is this medullary root of the spinal accessory nerve. So then we have the next root, that is the spinal root. Spinal, यहाँ पे this you can see here, one, and this is the second root. So this is the medullary root here. That means from the lateral aspect of medulla oblongata, and here this is from the cervical part of the spinal cord. ये दोनों रूट्स होते, दोनों रूट्स को मिल जाके they will form spinal accessory. लेकिन ये वाला जो होता है, this one, that is the spinal root, ये through the foramen, that is the foramen magnum से होके it will join with this root. ठीक है, through foramen magnum से होके it will join this medullary root, और दोनों जो spinal accessory nerve बनाते हैं वो that leaves the foramen cranium through foramen lacerum से, एक foramen होता है वहां से होके बाहर निकलेगा, and here it supplies to the larynx, soft palate, pharynx, plus it also gives branches to the trapezius and stenocephalicus. दो muscles होती है, plus larynx, soft palate, pharynx, and plus the trapezius and stenocephalicus जो muscles होती हैं उनको भी supply करती है. So ये this is very short about the spinal accessory. उसमें इतना ज़्यादा कुछ है नहीं. So we have the last one, that is the hypoglossal nerve. So 12th cranial nerve जो होता है, that is the hypoglossal nerve. It is again a motor nerve from the medulla oblongata. यहाँ से आप देख सकते हैं फ्रॉम हियर कैन सी दिस इज द 12th वन फ्रॉम हियर. So this leaves the cranium through a foramen that is known as hypoglossal foramen. So hypoglossal foramen से होके आके it will supply to the muscles of the tongue. So muscles of the tongue, there seventh आएगी, that is the chorda tympani branch that will supply to the anterior two-third of the tongue. फिर उसके बाद आएगा glossopharyngeal आएगा, ठीक है. Eighth glossopharyngeal that will supply to the posterior one-third of the tongue. Then we have the 12th one, that is hypoglossal nerve that will supply also ये भी जो muscles of the tongue है उनको supply करते. So these are the three nerves that will supply to the tongue. You remember these three. So this was all about the cranial nerves. Now we have another very short topic, that is the spinal nerve. As we know, spinal nerve जो होती है sensory होते हैं कि motor होते हैं ये. Can you hear me?
Motor mostly.
ये sensory होते हैं कि motor होते हैं ये? Anyone? जो cranial nerves हमने देखे हैं, they are either sensory, motor और mixed. तो spinal nerves क्या होंगी?
motor,
मोटर. और कोई?
सर
mixed,
सेंसरी, मोटर और ये भी मिक्सड होती है.
तीनों?
जी सर.
और कोई?
मिक्सड होती है सर.
ये मिक्सड होती है ये. ऑल द सेंसरी नर्व जो होती है इनमें क्या होता है, ये सारी मिक्सड होती है. इसमें कोई सेंसरी नहीं होती है, कोई मोटर नहीं होते. दे आर मिक्सड, दे कंटेन्स बोथ द फाइबर्स. सेंसरी भी होती है इसमें मोटर नर्व फाइबर्स भी. सो दे आर ऑल मिक्सड नर्व फाइबर्स. सो इसमें कितने होते हैं? ऑक्स में देयर आर 37 पेयर्स और इसमें 42 होते हैं. डॉग में 36 कभी होते हैं, 37 होते हैं, and 39 in case of pigs and 36 pairs in case of the fowl. जो spinal nerves हमको पता है, जैसे they arise from the spinal cord, जैसे cranial nerve they arise from the brain, different parts of the brain. General हम बोल के they arise from the brain, while as the spinal nerve they arise from the spinal cord. So this is the cross section of the spinal cord. ये आएगा white matter here. This is in the form of H, that is the gray matter. So this is the spinal nerve. So each spinal nerve, it has got two roots. So it is attached with this spinal cord by the two roots. This one, it is the dorsal root, and this one, this is the ventral root. तो जो dorsal root होता है, it contains sensory nerve fibers, while as जो ventral होता है, ये motor nerve fibers होते हैं. Both these two, they will unite together and they form the spinal nerve. So ये आ गया आपका spinal, दोनों मिल जाते हैं, they form it. And here in this the dorsal root जो होता है, dorsal part, here it forms a ganglion that is called as dorsal root ganglion. That is made of pseudo-unipolar neurons. वो इसमें physiology में पढ़ेंगे. Pseudo-unipolar neurons बनाता है dorsal root ganglion. So here I just want to tell you that this spinal nerve जो होते हैं, इसमें two roots होते हैं. एक सेंसरी होता है, that is dorsal root. One is the motor in nature, that is the ventral root. These two roots, they unite together and they form a spinal nerve. जो spinal nerve होती है, it leaves through a foramen. spinal nerve होती है, single spinal nerve, एक foramen से पास होती है. इसको क्या बोलते हैं?
इंटरवर्टिब्रल.
हैं?
इंटरवर्टिब्रल फोराmen.
इंटरवर्टिब्रल, शाबाश, इंटरवर्टिब्रल फोरामेन बोलते हैं. सो थ्रू जो वर्टिब्रीज के बीच में होते हैं, जो वर्टिब्रीज जो होते हैं उनके बीच में जो होते हैं, जो फोरामेन्स होते हैं. सो थ्रू दिस फोरामेन जो स्पाइनल नर्व जो होते हैं, दे विल कम आउट. सो ये यहाँ से जाएगा और ये यहाँ से जाएगा. सो व्हेन दे लीव दिस इंटरवर्टिब्रल फोरामेन, तो इनको क्या हो जाता है, ये डिवाइड हो जाते हैं। एक बनाएगा, एक डॉर्सल राइमाई बनाएगा या डॉर्सल प्राइमरी ब्रांच बनाएगा, एक बनाएगा वेंट्रल राइमाई जो नीचे की तरफ ब्रांच आएगी, दैट इज नोन एज वेंट्रल राइमाई या वेंट्रल प्राइमरी ब्रांच। ये जो वेंट्रल राइमाई होता है, वेंट्रल पार्ट्स ऑफ द बॉडी, दैट मीन्स यहाँ पे जो मसल्स होंगी, स्किन होगी, प्लस फोर लिम्ब आएगा या हैंड लिम्ब आएगा, वहाँ दिस वेंट्रल राइमाई इट विल सप्लाइज टू दो स्ट्रक्चर्स। वाइल जो डॉर्सल होगी, अगर दिस इज द एनिमल का बैक है यहाँ पे, सो यहाँ पे ऊपर की तरफ दिस डॉर्सल राइमाई इट विल सप्लाई हियर द स्किन and the muscles that are present on the dorsal aspect of the back। यहाँ पे जो जितने भी muscles होंगे, skin होगे, उसको they are supplied by the dorsal rami or this dorsal branch। ठीक है, जिस ventral rami आपको पता है, they form as a very important structure in this forelimb that is known as brachial plexus। ठीक है, it is because of this वेंट्रल प्राइमरी ब्रांच या वेंट्रल राइमाई, वो बनाते हैं प्लेक्सस, बनाते हैं एक नेटवर्क बनाते हैं, दैट इज कॉल्ड एज ब्रैकियल व्हिच सप्लाइज टू द फोर लिम्ब। और हैंड लिम्ब में जब ये दीज स्पाइनल नर्व्स व्हेन दे गो इनटू द हैंड लिम्ब, दे विल फॉर्म हियर अ प्लेक्सस दैट इज कॉल्ड एज लंबोसैक्रल प्लेक्सस। दिस आर वेरी टू प्लेक्सस वेरी इंपॉर्टेंट, जो हमेशा एक्सटर्नल में आते ही आते हैं। वन इज ब्रैकियल प्लेक्सस, you will discuss this in this forelimb and lumbosacral plexus, so you will be taught there in hind limb and pelvis। so दो important plexus they are formed by these spinal nerves। so ये एक introductory था इसमें कि spinal nerve जो होती है, from which wire how they arise, from where they arise and how spinal nerves they are formed and to which structures they are supplied। so now this ये स्पाइनल नर्व्स जो होते हैं, इन केस ऑफ ऑक्स जो सर्वाइकल होते हैं वो 8 होते हैं, थोरेसिक देयर आर 13 पेयर्स ऑफ रिब्स, तो स्पाइनल नर्व भी 13 ही होते हैं। लंबर 6, सैक्रल 5, सैक्रल स्पाइनल नर्व दे आर 5 पेयर्स, कॉक्सियल भी 5 पेयर्स होते हैं। वैसे देयर हॉर्स में 8, 18, 6, 5, 5, वैसे डॉग में 8, 13, 7, 3 और कॉक्सियल सैक्रल स्पाइनल नर्व जो उसमें वेरिएशन है, कभी 5 होते हैं, कभी 6 होते हैं। एंड सेम हियर वी हैव द पिग, एंड इन केस ऑफ फाउल वी हैव द सर्वाइकल स्पाइनल नर्व 15 एंड उसमें जो थोरेसिक होते हैं वो 7 प्लस दे हैव ए लंबोसैक्रल जो मास होता है उसमें। सो हियर द लंबोसैक्रल स्पाइनल नर्व